It's so weird to see myself inversed on the stream. It's so weird to see myself inversed. Gotta have that feedback loop.
And echo.
Gotta have that feedback loop.
And echo. What, the stream? Not me.
Oh, you know what? Actually, that'll be me. There you go. That's that silenced.
I think if I opened it, my computer would crash.
Yep.
Also, probably spoilers for things. Mm. Hello. Thank you, Ben. That was a wonderful introduction. Fuck you very much. Welcome everyone to our second episode. Hopefully, our first. Maybe the first one was like a pre-stream or like a tester. This will be the first of an actual series that we can get going in and continue doing. If not weekly, then maybe monthly. Who knows? But tonight we are joined, of course, as our by our Lord and Savior in a brand new office. He's the creator of Alterra. Chris McKenzie is with us, the GM.
Welcome, welcome. This is technically my day off, so James is going to be doing all the actual hard work, and I'm just going to periodically answer questions and make snide remarks towards James.
That's our whole friendship, though. So
That is-
it's no change to normal. And of course, we'll bring Ben in for opinions and such as well. Um, Wonderful. So, oh yeah, no, we'd love to hear them. Uh, I did not prepare any questions beforehand, so we'll just dive in with. I guess we could talk about the new logo. In fact, that could be a good place to start because
Yep, we have up on the stream in the top left. Otherwise, you can see it plastered over all of our social media channels now. It's on our Twitch, our Twitter. It's even on our Buy Me a Coffee site. And eventually it will be on the new website that is still in development. And who knows, maybe one day it will be on merch. Got to get those logo t-shirts on.
Yeah. If you know anyone who is in the merch business and who wants to sponsor us, by all means, put us in touch. The hefty finder's fee in it for you. By which we mean we will name a character after you in stream.
And if you're interested in actually watching how the logo got developed and designed, the kind of philosophy that went into it, you can actually watch that on our Alterra spoiler streams, which are, I think there might be one left over on the Twitch, otherwise they will be loaded to our YouTube channel. I recommend skipping the first three as I struggle to learn how to use Inkscape, and then just go to the last one where I figured it out enough to actually make some design choices.
But for those of you who don't want to watch that, Chris, talk us through the design. What's with the gems? There's different colored gems. And the A, why is it purple? What's going on there? Talk to me.
All right, so when it comes to Alterra, at least in my mind, or how I kind of designed it, because I wanted it to be a little bit more unique, there are four aspects to Alterra that I think needed to be represented in the logo. The first one of this is obviously the A for Alterra, the A for adventuring, the A that represents effectively the soul of the Noid with an Alterra, the catalyst of change, the stat blocks, the mechanics, and also kind of represents a little bit of the divine kind of paragon and the different domains. So we had to get that A in there. The rest should be pretty self-explanatory. We've got the flame logo representing the primordials and the elemental aspect, the physical aspect of Alterra. And we went with the flame purely because the fire element tends to be the most dominant when it comes to the primal monarchy or the princes of the evil elementals, etc. And also, I just think it's a good visual indicator, right? Who
Yeah,
doesn't love a bit of?
yeah. I was gonna
No,
say
that
everything
definitely
changes.
wasn't an inspiration in the slightest. I didn't even use one of those as a template to initially model it off of. In no way did I do any of that. If you haven't seen Avatar the series, though, go see it. It's great.
It is great. I'd never seen it before. Chris actually got me into it, along with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
My newest recommendation is Arcane. If you haven't seen Arcane, go see Arcane.
So the flame logo, the A. What else?
We've got the diamonds, which represent the Arcanites or arcane magic. They represent the laws of society. Now, there are actually 16 Arcanites in the main sphere, but I didn't want to crowd it with 16 diamonds, so we went with 8. Simply because it gets the base, more common versions of Arcanite in there, and each one does represent one of the base 8 Arcanites. And then similarly for the white but a little bit silvery lines on the A, they represent psionic threads, representing the old tombed and the mind imaginations. Right, because that's the 4 aspects when it comes to Alterra. It's the Arcanites who made the laws of the world, the Primordials who made the material of the world, the Old Tombed who made the psionic and the thoughts consciousness of the world, and you have the divine and the soul, which represents, the life and the actual creation and the monitoring and generation of story in the world. And that's what we wanted in this. The purple was just a nice. Actually, the purple was an accidental choice that we've really leaned into. Not in terms of the logo. The logo was deliberate on, but it's actually when we were initially setting up our Twitch channel, we had to click a theme, right? So we had to pick a color, and this ended up being the kind of, I think it was previously a more blue purple, but has moved to more red purple lately. And
Yeah.
and so do I, which is why we innately kind of were attracted towards that. So we incorporate that into our logo as well to represent kind of the magical nature of Alterra. Because it is, it's one of those. Most of it is a high magic setting. There are a few areas where it isn't, but on the all, it's pulp fantasy, so it naturally leans into high magic.
So let's talk about the 4 factions. Obviously, we've got the flame logo, the Noids and the Divine, the Arcanites and the Scion, Altombed. So how did you sort of come up with the idea for those 4? Did they just appear out of thin air, or did you create them based on existing materials?
Um, I would say they're heavily influenced by existing material just by their base nature. In most fantasy, you will see some combination of, the divine, of elementals and nature, of arcane magic. Like the kind of core ideas behind the concepts of these 4 factions isn't new or unique. Um,
Hmm.
I just really wanted to emphasize it within Alterra because it gives a bit more of a striking contrast. And obviously Alterra, because it did start out and is still primarily a D&D setting, it is heavily inspired by the D&D mechanics and kind of backlore, part of which it has inherited. Yeah. And I say that we have slowly branched out into other gaming systems. We have done a Call of Cthulhu setting with an Alterra, and there will be other settings. And the setting itself does lend itself to any mechanics or gameplay that caters to pulp fiction, that kind of high-powered fantasy fiction.
Hmm.
So with that, in order to kind of, as I was trying to differentiate it from just more generic fantasy that you do see with, saying, Forgotten Realms or any other kind of more generic fantasy setting, in order to kind of give it a more of an identity, I wanted to kind of emphasize my favorite aspects of Alterra. And that is, for me, I'm particularly drawn to philosophical debate and kind of storylines that center around that, right? Which is why most of my stories will center around the kind of philosophy behind each faction. Something
Hmm.
I've been able to really emphasize in the obviously altered, in the Shattered Altsphere. Yeah, I helped stop myself there.
So close. So close.
And yeah, and slowly these just took on more concrete. I think the only thing that's technically kind of semi-new, unique, but even then it's not really, is the Arcanites. I mean, the idea of primordials and the princes of the various factions within the primordial monarchy is pretty much a near direct, if not some of them are purely direct from the D&D lore of you have the Princes of the Apocalypse, and that is one of the I think actual the one of the core modules, the Prince of the Apocalypse, that helped us span out and actually flesh out more of the primordial faction within Alterra.
I think it's
Um,
season 2 or 3. I think it is. It's one of the first 3 books that was released for sure.
mm.
And you
So
could tell because a lot of it was a bit dated, wasn't it? When we
yeah,
played.
I actually modified that to Alterra in the Jedi setting.
Hmm.
Um, which there's a lot of choices I would change if I was to ever rerun that. I would still use the setting, but there's some stuff in the story I would restructure to make it fit more.
Hmm.
And obviously you have the divine of just you have various gods, so it makes sense to have a divine faction, and you have the Ultun, which represent Cthulhian kind of old gods, right? That's what they are. They are constructs and masters of the mind. They created the first aberration races of the mind flayers, beholders, etc. Um, I just wanted to give them a bit more unique identity so that I could actually move away from the old gods and Cthulhian lore and create a Alterra unique uh, kind of old gods Cthulhian mythos that wasn't that didn't rely on me fully knowing the Cthulhu mythos. I could just create it from scratch, and that's a lot of Alterra's. I wanted to make a lot of it from scratch so that I could have actual dominion over what happened, and more importantly, because I have a terrible memory, and honestly, a lot of Alterra choices get done purely on the idea of I don't need to remember anything about pre-existing lore from other kind of inspirations if I just make it myself.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, there's actually a good debate in the community about between homebrewers and campaign modulars of what is better and easier to do. Is it easier to homebrew a campaign or is it easier to run a module? And honestly, I think it depends on what kind of DM you are. Some people struggle to come up with just ideas on the fly or generate that kind of world building, so do prefer to have that kind of setting already so they can focus on just running the story. I'm in the other camp. I find it much easier to just generate the ideas on the fly when I need them, and build out a specific framework and kind of infrastructure of the world that is cemented in my mind. So I know enough about how the laws and the logic and the culture and the customs work that I don't need to try and remember what a book told me because, as I said, terrible memory. I can just interpret what that would most likely be based on extrapolating the character's personality and how that would interact with the world at large. In essence, I'm much easier when it comes to processing than it comes to remembering.
So obviously, when it comes to the world building of any sort of gaming system, any sort of homebrew, there's two general sort of schools of thought. There's the create the world and the religion and the factions, and then work your way down to how does this thing work? How does this thing work? Or you start with something really small like um, magic. How does magic fit into the world? And then you build out in a spiral from there. What would you say came first from you? Was it one particular idea? Was it the Arcanites themselves, or did you have the idea for Alterra and then branches that came down from that, or did was it like a tree, or did it like a
Mm.
spiral?
So I would say it's kind of a hybrid approach for Alterra, specifically because
Of
I
course it is.
don't actually flesh things out until the player interacts with them, or the player is likely to interact with them, right? There's a technique called spotlighting, where you only world build what is relevant to the current couple sessions and the adventure that you're doing and the story you're making. You don't world build details that aren't relevant, otherwise you will bog yourself down. And that is kind of something that does cripple a lot of DMs is that being bogged down and just trying to generate so much. Yep, it's easier. So what I do is I take that hybrid approach of I will build the framework of
Hmm.
it. So I will build the kind of faint lines so I have a rough shape. kind of like an outline sketch. I'll do an outline sketch of the world and get a rough idea of what I want from it, just based on the kind of general themes I'm going for in the world. Oh, 100%, to the point where I do more bookkeeping after a session than I ever do before a session.
So are the streams quite have you found, because obviously we didn't have those when we first started playing the home game. Um, do you find the streams more valuable that you're able to go, oh, what did I say for that? And then sort of look back on it? Or did you more just
You'd
write
think
it
in
down?
theory, but that would require me having time to go back and watch the streams.
I listen to, I don't even watch them. I listen because it's just one map. I just listen to them at double speed.
No, that is fair. One of my biggest time sinks now is now since I've started doing custom maps, and I can output a map decently quick if I have a rough idea of what I want in it. The hardest maps are always when I'm not actually sure what I want from the map. But yeah, I'm always amazed that I always keep like 2 to 3, maybe sometimes 4 maps ahead of you guys whenever we do a session. So I do have the content kind of prepared for at least like 2 to 3 more sessions, at least in terms of maps. Yeah, and that's what always amazes me.
Yeah, yeah.
No, you've been only been on this map technically for one session.
Yeah, the
You
past
guys
2 weeks.
you guys average 1 map per session,
Yeah.
and I've been counting to try and extrapolate how many maps I need ahead. And I've told James this, but slight spoilers for those guys on the stream. There, you guys are kind of in the Minds of Avarice, and I've expanded out of there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's about 5 maps per level of the Minds of Avarice. There are 3 levels, so there are 12 to 15 maps. Which, by the way, I've caught up on my map making. Most of the Minds of Avarice are fully mapped out now, which means I now have not just 3 to 4 maps ahead of you guys. I am a good 12 to 15 maps ahead of you.
Teleport.
However, to be fair,
No,
to
yeah.
that, I made a lot of those maps with the idea of like 9 to 12 of them are optional. There's a good chance the players will never go into those maps, and I'm okay with that. You will miss out a ton of loot, but that is your own fault, not mine.
Oh God, Wolfie, if you're watching this, please don't make us go back for all the loot. I mean, I'm a completionist gamer, but I love story more. I want to get to the story. Yeah, he absolutely is.
Now, to James's relief or possible dismay still, there's only 4 kind of essentially mandatory maps in that they are the most direct route to your goal of getting out the Mines of Avarice and getting into the Oni King's Palace.
Well, without the professor now, we may be wandering in circles without the guiding hand.
Professor being, I had so many. No, I don't have that many plans. See, this is the other thing is, I don't plan that far ahead. I don't plan stories that far ahead. I'll have a general theme of the story, and I kind of do with stories the same thing I do with world building. If I will sketch out the rough idea, I will have kind of an endpoint or a kind of theme that permeates the story. But in order to remain flexible as much as I can be, especially with this group of players, which you guys are a great group of players from a improv DM's perspective because you will happily generate your own story, and most of the time you will. And for the campaign story, I've fully gone into the Shattered Altsphere as a sandbox game because that's kind of what was desired when we were setting up the parameters for this next campaign. So while I have there is a couple major storylines that are already forming and that I've got kind of threaded through the world. Those are technically optional. Everything in the Shattered Altsphere is optional in a way. Because I've wanted to allow this off, these are these major factions. There is kind of things happening in the background, and you've kind of picked up little bits of that in terms of these strange entities that keep seemingly appearing to the party in terms of the Witness and what we've referred to as the Reaper so far. So as well as things forming in terms of for those who have watched the streams, since this is a spoiler, if you haven't seen the streams, spoilers. Zormir picking up pieces of like the Arcanite ring that allows him to now enter with the party into the Rainbow Plains. You have the various factions going on, and I have no idea whose side, if any, you will take in this. If your main plot is to get home, or if you end up staying and conquering the world, making your own faction, there's somebody else. Hmm.
Mm-hmm. And, and Gwent. Gwent wants out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gwen doesn't actually want to go home purely for backstory reasons. Gwent just wants to remain as far away from danger as possible.
You talk about the threads, the optional threads that you've sort of left dangling for us to pick up on. How
Mm.
how as a DM do you react when there's one that you don't even create that Ben you just created out of nothing in the torturing of is he a fellow goblin? Is he I forget, is he a he's a halfling. Okay. Okay. So like how do you I mean it's I would have run with that as well, to be honest. That's a hilarious thing. But I mean like where do you see it going? Do you see it going to it's going to be a one-on-one kind of Obi-Wan versus Darth Vader kind of fight, or is it just going to be a stab, twist, haha, got you, you bastard kind of thing, and it ends there? Mm, got it, Moriarty.
I think it's a great example of why I try and keep it Alterra kind of physics simulator-y rather than structured. Is Big Toe will have a personality and will have like a set of characteristics that he'll adhere to.
Mm,
As well as kind of having his own framework around him of like which factions he's aligned to, kind of what his temperament is and alignment is, and what he's willing to kind of go to depending on how much he's pushed. Um, so I don't need to so much know the story or need to come up with a story so much as I just need to know how would this NPC react to being taunted, and what position is he in to be doing something. Is he in a position or has he been taunted enough where he will go out of his way? Or is he already in a path that he can go, okay, I can do this side mission because it aligns with my current mission of going and finding and stabbing Fukyu. Um, and we are in that second one in that the party have already learned that the warder, especially most likely the next day or two, depending on how long it takes you guys to progress a day or two, because I never know when you guys are going to do long rests.
mm,
If the warder tries to do ascending to the professor to get an
mm,
update,
yeah.
yeah, which is
Uh,
going to send red flags. He's Yep.
yeah, for Ben, in case you didn't know, and for the audience, the professor is obviously reporting back to um, their cell leader and actually said, "Yes, Alvina has taken your daughter. I will keep an eye on her, but perhaps send someone to come pick her up because she's in very clear danger." Kind of thing. Uh, mm, I'm no.
Hmm.
Mm,
Yeah, and the characters are able to take whatever they'd like. It doesn't so much matter to the world.
mm. good example of yeah, metagaming or lack thereof, which is good. Um, so that's been covered. Let me see. I did have a question about the Arcanites, because obviously we've it's a big sort of nexus point. It's a big sort of plot device. The Prime War is referenced. The Prime Wars rather are referenced multiple times, and obviously the Fey Wars are mentioned a few times by Blackstar, and are mentioned. They were mentioned in the pre-stream games as possibly coming back. So war seems to be an almost constant thread, either the Fey War or the Prime War. When it comes to the Arcan Knights, who, like, how did you come up with their abilities, the different, just from a purely morbid curiosity, how did you come up with a black does this, blue does this, red does this kind of thing, and all that?
Yeah, so we were going to briefly touch on this a couple questions ago as well. So this is a good kind of coming back to it.
Mm-hmm.
The Arcanites are the only thing that are kind of semi-unique about Alterra,
Yeah.
in that even then they're not purely unique. This idea of kind of creators who, and you see that in terms of like things like the weave, right? That the laws of reality or the laws of magic are weaved or created in some fashion, and this was partially kind of born out of the weave. I wanted, again, similar to the kind of princes of the apocalypse, I wanted to make it more Alterra. I wanted to make it more distinct and unique. So I created a kind of custom origin to effectively the weave of these creatures who constructed the laws of reality. And I think some point during our first campaign, I kind of structured out the mythos or the creation lore, or the creation myth, I think is referred to as, a little bit more of, there was these entities who are each responsible for a major aspect of the world. Either the physical nature of the world, the cognitive nature of the world, the spiritual nature of the world, or the actual laws that govern everything in between. And
Mm.
part of this is because I also have a physics or partly physics background of I did like the idea of essentially being these four fundamental forces of nature, these four fundamental areas of nature that come together.
And how do they
So
work against each other?
yeah,
Mm.
so I created, I wanted somebody or some faction in charge of the actual laws of reality themselves. Also because it helped me make the Alterra magic system a little bit more unique and less just uh, soft
Magic
magic.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
have you ever, like, you know how much magic happens? Because a lot of people debate this all the time about the Wheel of Time and Discworld and Lord of the Rings. You know how much magic gets discussed in Lord of the Rings? Gandalf turns up in The Hobbit, sets some pine cones on fire, then fucks off. He burns the forest down, and then buggers off somewhere. He cracks a
well, see, that's
rock
actually,
and
you're touching on
throws.
two philosophy of magic there. There's soft magic and hard magic, and I can't remember if the terms themselves were coined by Brendan Sanderson or if he just helped inspire them.
Mm.
Um, I'm just pitching things for different things now. Brendan Sanderson, fantastic offer. Go read Brendan Sanderson if you ever want to read anything with like hard magic. It's great because Brendan Sanderson, for each one of his different novel series, just creates an entirely different hard magic system, and it's phenomenal. But the idea of soft magic and hard magic is the concept that soft magic isn't so much explained. It is just there is magic, it exists. It is kind of similar to, I guess, like we said, Lord of the Rings. Of they cast fire, they do magic because magic exists, and they can do magic. There isn't so much laws around it as you're not entirely sure what they can and cannot do. And then there is hard magic where it has a rule book. Essentially, it has a codified rule book. Even if you don't know the rule book, there is a solid logic to the magic where it can only do so much. And when it comes to writing, um, you have to take two different approaches to how you can resolve your story or how you can resolve conflicts with magic based on which magic system you're using. Because you don't want to be using soft magic to resolve story conflict points. You want to be using characterization and making it about character choices. Just because you can effectively Deus Machina a lot of soft magic, so you can't just pool random magic of, oh, look, we're stuck down here, of, well, it's okay because I have teleportation magic. We can just teleport up. Because then you get the fact of, wait, you could just do that. Well, why can't you just do that for a lot of the story points? Or how do I know that you're actually in any danger and you can't just do something that you've not told us about because you're using soft magic? Whereas with hard magic, you can actually do a little bit more of your problems can be solved by magic because you know the logic behind the magic and if it could be useful here and there, to the point where even the readers could be going, okay, so I know your magic can do this and this. Maybe if you do this, or if you do this, oh no, see, there's like these 3 limitations, so you can't do that. So you can get creative more with it. Right, that was primarily a tangential point. Of I wanted to kind of do a little bit more of a hybrid approach there, make it a little bit less soft magic, not fully hard magic, but kind of just also give an in-world lore reason behind the mechanics. And this is how I initially got onto the concept of the kind of Noid soul and the idea of mana levels within the soul and the soul as a catalyst and vessel and kind of channeler of various magic. And one of the reasons why, for example, gods don't just give high-level cleric magic to all their followers is because the soul, much like any other organism, has to be grown. It has to be empowered and kind of, it's like a muscle. It has to be worked. So you have, for example, fighters, wizards, or anything, they gain more power, or they are able to channel greater magic in terms of the spellcasters by working out their soul to allow it to increase in mana levels so that they can channel more energy. And similar for clerics, if they can gain level in clerics by expanding their soul so they can channel more of their divine powers from their gods. And it's also similar. It also kind of justifies changing classes mid-campaign, which is also something I had to. A lot of my kind of reasons and lore actually come from interpreting the mechanics and having to give an in-game reason for the mechanics. So, for example, if you allow players to change classes mid-campaign, it's a little bit, maybe not unfair, but it's kind of boring. And since I specialize in pulp power fantasy fiction, it kind of goes against the spirit of Alterra to be like, oh, you want to level up or you want to change class? Great, you're going back to level 1. Right? If you want to go from, and we can actually see this in the current Shattered Altsphere with Lugrim's character. Lugrim is changing and will be slowly changing from a warlock over to a, I'm pretty sure, sorcerer. Over time, and it will slowly expand. I just wanted to have like a nice story arc there because I think it really helps kind of give flesh Lou's character out a bit more in terms of his backstory and his connections to the world. Yeah. And also kind of just ties them to some of the other major plots. A lot of the storylines and the things I kind of introduce into the Shattered Altsphere is to introduce into something larger later on, potentially. Depending on if it's explored or given time to flesh out. You've seen this with the Amethyst Sword giving these strange dreams to Alvina, in which she was on the bow of a ship, or a bow of a technological ship, in the body of a mind flayer who was essentially in Spartan Halo armor, watching a fleet of elemental ships ascend towards the rainbow walls and crystal dragons coming out of it. In theory, that will, and like I said, I've sketched out the storyline where that kind of involves. I haven't got the exact beats or details for every bit, but I also don't need to because it will change and morph depending on the players.
Yeah. Big dreams are
yeah, and that way I can just be more responsive to the players. Yeah. But anyway, this was about Arcanite. So we'll get back to that off. In order to kind of allow that, I also had to kind of allow for a reason of why a high-level fighter could suddenly become a high-level wizard. And it's because the innate kind of thing that allows them to do their power, the soul, is still expanded. It's still enlarged or more muscular, right? It just kind of needs to be slightly tweaked and changed. So there might be like a crossover period, like we're doing with Lugrim, where you need to like change it over, but you don't have to go through 20 to 50 sessions of leveling up again. Welcome to the stream, Sheepbard. Oh, Sheepbeard. Misread that. I forgot. I didn't even see the E. So yeah, that's how we got onto the soul, and I wanted kind of like taking that back a step then of, okay, well, how does the laws of this world actually work? What governs, if I wanted to do something strange to the laws, what kind of governs that? So I wanted this faction, these entities, to be in charge of actually weaving the laws. And whenever you get into weaving, you inevitably have arachnid kind of symbology or ideas behind it. So kind of using that combination of the weave, of it being kind of woven and created, you get these kind of spider-like constructs. I was also partially inspired by anyone who's seen it called Final Frontier, where they have crystal spiders who are responsible for weaving the reality together. No,
Oh,
not Final Frontier, Final Space.
Oh, Final Space, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so you know how they have the crystal spiders who are responsible for kind of weaving the walls. So that actually, I was watching that at the time I was constructing more of the lore off, and you'll be amazed by how much of Alterra lore is just inspired by whatever I'm watching that week.
There was one session, it seemed 100% just Stargatey.
Entirely possible.
I forget which one it was, but there was a good 3 or 4 sessions that was just, so you step through the gate. Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess we do. Yeah.
There's left some of the aberration ships in the Shattered Altsphere, particularly I think it's either Mindflayer or Beholders. The ship construction there is inspired by Wraith ships from Atlantis, or from Stargate Atlantis, in which they are a organic hybrid kind of construction. And even then, I think pretty sure that was inspired partly by Farscape and their organic ships, the Leviathan.
Yeah. The Leviathans and
Inspired by the Borg.
Yeah, and you kind of have this aspect where a lot of fantasy, because fantasy is written by nerds, right? Fantasy is written by nerds, and nerds watch other fantasy. So you end up, and you can see it whenever you trace the lineage of fantasy and fantasy tropes, of it ends up constantly being, you see these repeat patterns that have just been kind of tweaked and modified and expanded upon, because fantasy inherently builds upon itself as a genre because of that kind of funneling of nerd readership and then into nerd writers. So yeah, that's how we came to, and obviously constructs or magic and creation has kind of got this crystalline symbology or theme to it already in a lot of fantasy. You see this with like magic crystals or any other fantasy show that has magic be a crystalline form. So you have Arcanites as these spider-like constructs that are made of crystals because magic is crystalline. And therefore, Arcanite must be either a part of their body or a materialization of just concentrated magic throughout the world. And it's actually how Arcanite is kind of, I guess, grown in Alterra, is it's found wherever there is a deep concentration of law. In that, whatever the Arcanite represents, if there's a deep concentration of that theme, Arcanite will go there.
Okay.
I get to that in a little bit more in a second with the various Arcanites. So with that, we then came to just the standard leap of, hey, we have crystals, we have, but wouldn't it be cool if we had different types of magic crystals? Well, we need something to represent the different magic crystals, so how about color, right? Because colored crystals, great, magic. And then we expanded out of, okay, we have like these different magic crystals that do slightly different things to magic. And we've got a slight... Yeah, James, I think your video is just going there. Or we got a lot of wind coming in.
I think
One
it's
second.
just the headphones. They're picking up just random static.
Yeah. 1 second, streamers, we have slight technical issues. Yeah, I'll do it for now. Oh, is it... Okay, things are just slowing down there. So we created these different kind of Arcanites and their different crystals to represent the kind of order of magic. And initially, I think we only had like 6 of the base ones before we started expanding them out, and we eventually fleshed them out to 14 and then to 16. And the reason purely for that is because at a later stage of lore development, and I say we, it's mostly just whoever I was randomly talking with that week as well.
Oh, we've lost James.
Oh well.
That's fine.
Our lore monger will be back in a second, and they're unfortunately just not going to get this good lore of. We were starting to associate the different factions with bigger themes. In particular, the theme of numbers. So we'd already done this with the Radiant domains being related to 7, because 7 is a lucky or holy number. And that we had 7 planes, or 7 lower and upper planes based on the original D&D lore. So we actually just expanded on that and made it more Alterra. By having the 7 different pantheons, all represent kind of one of the 7, either or one of the 7 divine planes. It could either be a Nirvana heaven or a damnation. They are technically the same plane, just if you go for the upper or lower levels.
Mhm.
And then we fleshed out a little bit of the primordials. Have this 5 constantly reoccurring through it. You have the 5 dragons. You have the 4 princes of the apocalypse, and then elemental evil. So you have 5. So 5 just kept showing up a lot in the primordials. And we had the Radiant with 7, and we had the Primordials with 5. We then kind of had to then figure out numberings essentially for the Arcanites and the Old Tombed, and that the Old Tombed eventually expanded out into 10 because base 10 was very logical in the sense of they were the origins of thought, of imagination, of logic, of consciousness, and because humans innately do base 10, it made sense to have 10.
Well,
Ultimate.
you think like humans do base 10, but then you've got places like in America where they base everything on the imperial system still, and it's based on random crap.
Yeah, but see, there's another aspect of people discuss about fantasy. Or fantasy is very heavily inspired by whoever is writing it.
Yes, yes.
So it's one of those things of even I need to read outside of the kind of English world of fantasy a little bit to different cultures and how they interpret different fantasies. Because a lot of fantasy, particularly in the Western world, you see with that idea of fantasy kind of building upon itself is fantasy kind of innately builds upon Western fantasy because Western audiences read it, then they write more of it.
So I mean, a lot of Western fantasy tends to build from Germanic roots as well. So you've got the Brothers Grimm, the Grimm fairy tales, things like that. Then you've got Tolkien, you've got C.S. Lewis, who are the base world builders of a lot of fantasy games these days, especially in the Western world. But then you've got Eastern fantasy, which in like Japan is based around the manga and oh, we've got James back. Yeah, so it's based around like the spirits and on things, all the yokai, the gods. Then you've got like Russia with the Baba Yaga. That's all like the Eastern kind of stuff that I can really think of at the moment. And I think I'm the only one left because I can't hear Chris anymore because I think James broke everything. So I'm just going to sit here and chat until everyone sorts themselves out because I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. So how's everyone else doing? How you doing, chat? Yeah, being inspired by whatever you're watching, definitely a mood. Like Chris was saying, basing things on what you're watching, like Stargate, Farscape, what have you, that stuff. Yeah, we're having technical difficulties, so not entirely sure what's going on. If James is talking, they are muted. Oh, we've lost Chris. So yeah, so it's all going well so far. I know personally, I'm planning a one shot, possibly based in Alterra, but a lot of the creatures will be based around Scottish folklore, mythical creatures. So, without giving too much away, there are a lot of mythical creatures in Scotland, and I'm gonna be gathering information about those and turning them into D&D characters if they're not done already. And we've got some movement from James. Don't know what's happening now. Anyway, yeah, like I was saying, I've completely forgotten. What was I talking about? And I'm all by myself now. Yes, I'm planning on something based on Scottish creatures. So they will be.
Swear to God, I'm going to destroy this computer. I really am. I'm so done.
Fair enough. I was just chatting about random shit. So.
Has Chris has vanished as well?
Yeah, we've lost Chris as well.
Oh, good. It's not just me. Hopefully he's running around here with an actual computer I can have. So anyway, actually, while Chris is gone, Ben.
Hello there.
General Kenobi. How... So, because you've obviously played in multiple Alterra games, probably one of the most, aside from me, yeah, you and Bob were some of the sort of first folks that we from outside the original circle that we had round. So you've seen it develop. How to you, because you seem to be, well, very nerdy. The sort of magic system.
Yes.
How does that compare for you, having played a bard and having played, well, an arcane person? I think you played a wizard.
I've played
Necromancer.
a wizard. I've played artificers. I've played rangers. I've played and now bard. Because I think your Furry 5 was based in a Alterra Escape, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, magic wise, from a regular D&D campaign, a lot of like the Arcanites will empower a lot of spells. Like when we were doing the I can't remember what we called it, Arcanet games, and Tink had utilised a bunch of Arcanites into Steel, the mechanical dragon.
Yes.
So she had gotten hold of I think it was orange Arcanite ring to focus a wand of fireballs to reduce the range and increase the damage, which in rules or basic home D&D isn't a thing. But yeah, the Arcanites are interesting.
The effects that they create certainly
Yes.
do make the game a lot more interesting, a lot more like it can create different effects that it's a lot of it can be very rule of cool, which is quite nice.
So it's kind of like changing the weapons type or damage type of weapons. So like the anti-man rifles, that seems to be the default for artificers now.
Yeah, a lot of antimatter rifles.
And I think I'm to blame for that because I was the first one to use.
Yeah, you were. Oh, look, I can do 8 damage to this creature with one shot, and I'll do it again.
6
oh well,
D8
you know,
plus
6 die 8
yep.
plus a bunch. Okay, well, I guess everything in future is just going to be an angel that's resistant to necrotic.
But
Hooray!
then Chris allowed us to make amendments or modifications to it to change the weapon or damage type.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that was at the cost of maybe a long rest, or with Zormir's one where the cartridge essentially is broken and it randomizes the damage type. Or at least it did when it was a firearm rather than a baton now.
But it does that? Cool.
That's why they were rolling for the damage type in the early games. So,
Oh. I never got that.
right.
Yeah.
Apparently, or I think the way Bob was saying it was that Junior had essentially damaged the gun in some way.
Right.
Oh, it looks like we've got Chris back.
I have returned.
Did your internet cut out again?
No, my entire laptop just froze up.
Oh.
It's the virus is catching.
Apparently so.
Techno curse.
Quite sure what
It's
happened
the
there.
curse of the junk rat.
The ghost in the
Where do we
machine.
get to? What are we talking about?
Well, don't know what you're talking about. You're talking about different Arcanites and things, and then me and James were talking about similar sort of stuff, like how it changes the game from regular D&D. We were saying stuff like when I was playing Tink, utilizing it in my weaponry to change damage types and things like that, and how with Zormir's gun, it was essentially damaged and was changing the damage type randomly. And then he got hold of, what did you say was the indigo? No, not indigo. Whatever one is changed the beam into a baton now, or a blade.
I think he got Vermilion. Vermilion's the
Yeah.
laser one. Yeah, because he wanted to incorporate that with his subclass that obviously is the armorer, so it lets him go switch from range to melee.
Mm-hmm.
So when he switches his armor out, he can switch his weapon type out.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's become quite fun that we're even moving from Arcanite to creating our own classes. Obviously, we created Animancer, Chris and I together. We created Animancer for specifically for this game because none of the other I wanted to play something akin to Sorcerer or Cleric, but Divine Soul Sorcerer just didn't feel right. So it was quite fun to think, okay, what if the magic came from another source that wasn't the Arcanites and wasn't the gods? It came from the Scion network, but wasn't warlocky, you know. So it was quite fun to do that, to branch out. There's a new monk. I think they've updated the monk of the elements subclass to include different aspects, more of the sort of elemental side rather than just you spend key points to cast this spell. You can only cast it once a day with the amount of key points you get, kind of thing. Which is quite fun, actually. Yeah, we were saying that it has a lot of it has become very sort of rule of cool. Destiny points as well have become a very big thing that we didn't have in the pre-stream games.
I think those technically, because they were in development, or at least part way in development in pre-stream games, they're just kind of the final form of a slow evolution from inspiration to more things that are a little bit more rule cool allowance.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing I have noticed with Alterra. A lot of it is set up in a way to make every decision that you want to make can be as cool as you want it to be.
When it comes to that territory of it being pulp fantasy and power fantasy,
yeah, and I think we
I think who knows. It's one of the to finish up my train of thought before my laptop just broke. I actually wanted to comment on how I think we're actually seeing a lot more of that integration between the Western and Eastern fantasy genres. You see that with especially even more kind of niche Eastern, or even kind of like, I don't even know if it technically counts as Eastern, but I think one of the big examples of that is obviously the Witcher series coming over.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's got more of that East Europe influence to it, and you're seeing, and obviously with the rise and prevalence of anime being more just kind of mainstream, you get this cool meshing. I still need to see, I think it's Samurai Batman or at some point.
I've seen it. It's the ending of it gets a bit weird.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect anything else.
um,
But you see this kind of meshing and joining of different fantasy cultures
Mhm.
around the world building upon itself now.
yeah.
We've kind of gone to like the globalized age of fantasy.
I mean, to touch back on Avatar. A lot
Mm.
when it first came out, a lot of people did actually think it was an anime because it has sort of anime techniques
I mean,
implemented into it.
I'm pretty sure it's still heavily debated whether or not Avatar counts as anime or not.
It not really, seeing as it is produced by a Western animation um, company.
But
It
that's the debate, though, isn't it?
only really counts as anime if it originates in Japan.
But see, while that may be the more kind of official stance, that is still a divided opinion among the various communities of, is anime the style or is anime the origin? Because there is a discrepancy on that opinion. Some people do consider anime to be I'm just reading Sheepbeard's comments. Anime isn't just where it's from.
No,
And you could say the same with what about American animation, right? A lot of American animation gets animated in other countries. So is it the fact that it's written in America or that it's produced in America? But what about if it's being outsourced there too? Or what if it has writers who aren't innately American, right? When you get to this globalization of when it's all a melting pot, what technically counts and does it matter?
I mean you could argue that it is the style. Because I know shows like Futurama, they have
Mhm.
done in one of the latest episodes in the seasons. Um, they did a Saturday morning cartoon style. They did an anime style on a bunch of. Um, it was like an overarching story
Mm.
point, and but even though yes, it is produced by it was more of a parody of the anime than anything.
Yeah, I think a more recent example of that is Star Wars Vision, where
Hmm.
they've taken a what is stereotypically an American IP and they've created stories in for Japanese companies in that anime-like styles.
But
Mhm.
then you can argue that Lucas originally based Star Wars on Japanese folklore and samurais and things.
Hmm. It's that thing, right? As we get into this globalized age of fantasy, that those kind of barriers between those different categories are going to get less and less.
Hmm.
Which can
Um,
only be a good thing
Oh yeah,
because it's
oh
well,
yeah,
getting
well, it's
closer.
definitely going to be like a complete melting pot. Um, things will always be inspired by others. I don't know if you heard before your laptop broke, but I was saying how Western fantasy is heavily based on things like the Brothers Grimm,
Yeah,
by
yeah.
Tolkien, by C.S. Lewis, and by the Witcher franchise now, especially.
Hmm.
Um,
Oni and hags are like Japanese boogeymen and um, East German and Bavarian kind of. They stole kids. That's it.
yeah, and
A lot of it comes
in
from there.
Russia, you've got the Baba Yaga,
Yeah,
who
I heard that.
steal your kids and eat kids and what have you, with the house on the chicken legs,
Yes,
which I
Babalai
think,
Saga.
which has been in a few animes, which I think also inspired Howl's Moving Castle.
Oh, I suppose it
I
did.
think don't like take that as fact because Howl's Moving Castle I think originally was a book written by a Welsh woman.
Fun fact: I told Chris many moons ago that he looked like the dog from Howl's Moving Castle.
I see that.
Yeah, see? Other people see it, Chris. It's a compliment.
I don't remember you saying this. I'm gonna take a word for it.
I will search through the chat. We will. How about that? This will be our Twitter poll for the next week. Does Chris look like this dog from Howl's Moving Castle? Answer: he does.
I mean, it's not so much like looking like him, but I get what you mean. I can see it.
The beard. He looked more like it when his hair was a little longer. Anyway,
Hair's getting a little longer again.
Anyway, where were we? We were.
I think we'd gone to numbering systems in Alterra in that, and James constantly likes to point this out with Alterra's numbering. We have the divine radiant domains based on number 7.
Mm-hmm.
We have the primordials based on number 5. 5 dragons, or 5 types of dragons, or at least colored dragons. The 4 princes plus Elder Eye make 5. We eventually got to primordials equal to number 10, so there are 10 ultimed.
And I was a sheepbeard there. Yeah, I think it was Dan Wynne Jones that wrote House Moving Castle. So
cool.
Yeah.
Is there 10 primordials?
Not primordials. Ultimed.
Ultimed? 10 ultimed?
Yeah. Well, there is now. This is just as the advancement of the lore has been fleshed out.
Right.
Well, fair. There's been for a while now, but the ultimed is something I've not had a chance to fully flesh out since we didn't get to complete the Call of Cthulhu campaign, which is a shame.
I do have an idea for one of the one shots coming up to do an Alterra version of Call of Cthulhu. So I would quite like to jump back into that and hopefully have you play.
It's a good setting, and I have
it's a really fun setting to play.
Some other stories in that setting.
During the technical difficulties, I was saying about one of the one shots for our upcoming 24-hour stream, whenever that's going to be, making a storyline based around some of the Scottish mythological creatures.
Very cool.
So I've got an idea. The main reason I'm doing that is because I saw a homebrew of a Scottish folklore creature, and I thought, ooh, that's cool. And then that gave me a few ideas. It's still in its early stages, but I've got an idea for it.
Is it Nessie?
No.
Oh.
That would be too obvious.
You suck.
Yep.
You might hear like a whale sort of noise. It might be based around Loch Ness and Loch Lomond.
We'll just have to wait and find out.
Yeah.
Yes, we will.
To follow on to that, and we have the Arcanites, which are now base 16, because they represent logic, and we associate them with base 16 logic.
Oh.
That's why there's 16 Arcanites.
I never got that.
Wow. For those of you who didn't get that, I mean, James, there are 16 Arcanites because they are based on the idea of they represent logic and base 16 logic.
What does that mean? What is base? I'm not gonna ask. I'm gonna look a fool on stream, even more so than normal.
Well, you know how humans use base 10.
What does that mean?
Like centimeters, meters, kilograms.
Oh, right.
Well, technically it isn't so much just that, but base 10 is how you count before you count to the next one, right? So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you go to 2 decimals.
Yes.
2 units. And similar, you go up there until you get it's 1, 1, or 2, 1, 3, 1. Every time you get 10, you go over into the next one. And then again, if you times by 10, you go to the next, right? That's base 10. It's how you count before you go to the next, before you go up a digit, right?
I know how to count.
Well, I know, but that's the idea of base 10. Computers use something different called hexadecimal, and it is base 16. So they count in 16, and because the Arcanites are based on logic and the idea of they created the laws of reality, and also there's this kind of semi-theme that Alterra is a computer simulation.
That's why
that is our simulation.
Yeah, that's why like your megabyte, gigabyte aren't like 1,000. They're 1028 or whatever it is. I can't remember off the top of my head.
So
Oh,
because of that, and because Alterra is our simulation and the Arcanites are the programmers of reality, they work on a base 16 logic. That's why there's 16 of them.
all right. Having spoken about the building blocks, then we'll probably get this as the last one then, since we're moving on. For those in the know, there are creatures above the uh, the Scion guys, the Arcanites, the
They're
Divine.
referred to collectively as the Arch Powers. Well,
Yes, and above them, I mean, as well.
The one above all.
oh yeah, but that's what the Primordials and the not Arch Powers. Sorry, Primevals. They are the original races of the multiverse, the Primevals. They represent the primordial monarchy, the All-Tombed, the Arcanites. They don't technically represent the gods. The gods are a second generation creation.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the original plot of Alterra, which one day I might be able to actually replay and actually finish at some point.
Yeah.
There is a primeval above the gods called the Archpowers, who created the gods, who are the original administrators of the soul engines and the original guardians of the soul engines. Only they're terrible at their job, and they created the gods to replace them so that they could go off and do their own thing. And
So
Yeah.
I was just looking at Sheepbeard's comment there. Is base 16 also 2 times 8 spider legs?
you know
No,
that's
no,
just
no, 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 no.
yep.
Harking back to your Arcanite spiders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's why Fool's Arcanite spiders are spiders, because while the
Yeah.
other Arcanites technically they're crystal constructs and they can take a spider-like form. They're highly mutable, so they don't have to take that form, and you can actually see this in Copper, who took the form of a Taurus city. And that's how you get the equivalent of Sigil in Alterra, which is the Copper Hub, which
Mm-hmm.
is the cosmopolitan hub of the multiverse. In that she literally folded in on herself and created a power vacuum because Copper is the arcanite of shifting color or shifting reality. She created the laws that dictate the relationship between the planes. She's able to fold in on herself and create effectively a permanent demi-plane inside of herself that has restricted access from the other primevals.
So,
Um,
finishing up with this session on how I think we'll finish up on this question: how the shattered Altsphere differs from the original Altsphere that we all know and love. If I've got my notes right, which I doubt I do, because they're all over the place. Um, that's them there. Just circles and lines and campaigns and question marks. Um, in the original, the demonoid race was created during the Prime Wars. When was it? Elder Evil stabbed Yellow, and in the Shattered Altsphere, he stabbed Copper, which is why the Altverse, all the barriers between the planes broke down. Have I got that right? Did I actually get one
uh,
right?
That is correct. The
Yeah.
general of that is correct. So to flesh that out a little bit more, the obviously for those who aren't aware of kind of the Cosmo lore of Alterra, which in broad strokes, the Prime Wars occurred when the Arch Powers created the gods and then fucked off. I'm going to summarize to keep it short. And the gods, who were then put in charge of creating Noid souls to flourish and create stories throughout the world, as is their purpose, because they are a just vehicle to play D&D in. The gods realized that there was a problem with this, with the elemental chaos and old gods constantly like probing people's minds and having them explode. That you actually can't create stable societies and therefore stories when there is constant disaster and invasion or anything like that, when there's constant instability. So they decided, and they preemptively, and this will change based on the character of the divine dogma that you're taught is that the gods saved the world. Technically, the truth is the gods were the ones who started the war, rather than they saved humanity from these other things. But it depends who you ask. There's a lot of different interpretations.
I think that was revealed in Kill Score, that they started the war for stories because stories fed them basically and amused them.
Not even just that. It's also just their purpose. They're driven to it as a meta thing. But it's also kind of covered a little bit in the Back to School pre-stream campaign, where we dive a little bit more into that. And it's one of those things of the difference between the divine dogma that's taught to the general society by the church and and what's kind of discovered by arcane students is that the hierarchy, as far as the church is concerned, is gods created everything. There were other entities that tried to destroy society and kill people, but the gods beat them off and made this perfect utopia. Whereas the arcane truth is that the gods are a second generation creation, and it was the Arcanites and the Primordials and the Old Tomb that actually shaped and created the world and were the original creators and kind of, I guess, administrators of it. They were the ones who balanced everything. And the gods came and usurped their domain. But as you can imagine, this is technically heretical knowledge. So the wizards who study the true history of reality like to not go and blout it out to the streets that they're aware of it, and it's actually studied in secret that the gods actually aren't the original creators of the world.
So would there be a secret sort of underground society dedicated to the truth?
Yeah, and it's actually one of the tests you have to take in the Back to School campaign when you're initially getting your Magi Cloak, is you have to structure the creation of the world. And in order to open the novice door to get your novice robes, you order it in the way the church has taught you.
I see.
But if you order it in its true order, it will unlock the Archmagi doorway to get your Archmagi robes.
I remember that because my character was raised. She was a dark
Based on
elf,
All-Tomb
wasn't
knowledge.
she? Yeah, she was raised by All-Tombed cultists. Spoiler. I miss Vesper. I miss playing her. She was cool.
Yeah, that was one of the things that we kind of baked in is the original kind of, there is this kind of secreted knowledge and lore the gods don't try and tell you. But anyway, back to kind of summarize. God started a war to rid the world of the All-Tombed and the Primordials because they were making it impossible to build anything. And they effectively created the Celestials and the Devils to go to war. They create the Angels and the Devils as their military force. And that's what happened. That's essentially how the Prime War started. Of the gods created a preemptive strike to just try and annihilate as much of the All-Tombed and Primordial influence as possible, with the Arcanites essentially taking a step back and trying to remain as neutral as possible to the entire thing. As far as they're concerned, so long as you didn't mess with the laws of reality, they didn't want to know, or they didn't want to take part in it. However, it didn't pan out as well as they'd hoped, and the Primordials and All-Tombed very quickly started creating military races of their own in the terms of the dragons and giants and the mind flayers and beholders and such. And that's how the Prime War happened, and it spanned about 1,000 to 2,000 years of this back and forth of the gods trying to annihilate these two other factions, these two factions trying to fight back. And this all kind of took a turn, and this will be slight spoilers a little bit, but it's also not relevant to any of the major campaigns. It's just kind of background lore. During the original main sphere history, King Evil, because that's technically his official title, is King Evil of the Primordial Monarchy.
Still can't get over that name.
The implications of this is that evil is an actual element in Alterra.
Yeah.
It's represented by the acid damage type. So it's the acid dragon in the 5 dragons. But King Evil, in order to try and turn the war, because the Primordial and All-Tomb factions that were temporarily allied were losing still, because the Divine were just had eons to prepare for this. he decided to try and get more radical and take one of these soul engines and try to destroy it and create effectively a massive bomb for the divine planes, or for one of the 7 divine planes. So he snuck in and he tricked Yellow into helping him infiltrate into the divine plane to the core of the engine, and he effectively betrayed Yellow and plunged the soul engine into Yellow's heart. And then effectively dialed the soul engine up to 100 output.
Which created the demonoid race, right?
Well, it actually resulted in Yellow having to effectively, if at any point he didn't stop dispersing the energy that was being created by the engine, he would explode and die. So in order to avoid that, because a soul engine creates souls, it had to create noise. However, by the tampering of King Evil, it had been tainted, so it was using yellow and evil energy to fuse in with the soul engine to create yellow and evil infused souls.
Evil,
So
unstable souls.
Yeah, yep. So evil, unstable souls, which is how you get the mythos of the demonoids, who are able to explode and destroy their own souls and transform themselves into their pure demon forms.
Very cool. In theory, if you stabbed into a god, would they create real Noid souls? Because obviously, only the
this
gods
can only
create.
happen with an Arcanite because they're able to kind of tweak the laws of reality around them to make it stable enough that they could probably do this. If you did it to a god, you'd probably just kill them because they wouldn't be able to actually disperse the energy through the natural flow of law. But yeah, it effectively forced Yellow to effectively imprison themselves while constantly concentrating inwards to disperse this energy, creating the abyss around them, and dispersing constant output of demonoid souls into the abyss and the layers beneath and above.
So
and they
how
are
does that?
effectively entrapped there.
So how does that differ in the Shattered Altsphere when
So the
Copper
Shattered
was stabbed?
Altsphere, the only difference that spawned this entire different reality is that instead of Yellow being tricked into helping King Evil, it was actually Copper. And Copper already has some kind of lore in the original world in that she saw what was happening to the war and also realized the gods were never going to be satisfied just controlling effectively 3/4 of the world. They'd already controlled the divine realms and the soul engines, and they were already trying to take over the primordial recycling nature of the cosmos, as well as the mind of it. And she tried to petition the other Arcanites to not so much get involved in the war, but to put in precautions and safety guards so that the gods couldn't try and invade and take over the source of all magic, which is just the core of the universe that allows them to write and rewrite the laws of reality. In the original world, the Arcanites kind of dismiss this. Because they're unaware of what kind of happens to Yellow a little bit. And Copper ends up going on her own and trying to seal the source of magic by herself, which is what causes the kind of mini shattering in a way, in that there is kind of a splinter in the planar lines and boundaries, even in the main sphere, and creates the city of Copper. And it's why you have factions and you have storylines such as Mr. Brightside trying to create his own god to try and tap into the source of all magic so that he can control it and monetize it.
Yeah.
Which is what the plot of the Headquarters of the Mad Capitalist originally was, or is that Mr. Brightside is trying to gain access to the source of all magic, so that every time you cast a spell, you have to pay for it.
A bit like gym spells.
Mad. Yeah, that's actually what that was based on. That's where I got the idea for it.
Yeah.
So that's why he's the mad capitalist, right? But in this new reality, Copper, because she is able to define and the kind of relationship between the planes, she is able to teleport out from around the soul engine and is able to kind of plane shift the soul engine before it explodes within her.
But it still explodes.
It does. So it does. That is actually one of the other alternatives, is that the soul engine in the Shattered Altsphere, one of the 7, I should state, because there are 7 soul engines. is shattered and is dispersed throughout the cosmos. That also, though, the releasing of energy and kind of thinking that is it pretty much shreds the planar boundaries, shattering the entire cosmos. However, it also leaves people to discover fragments of the Soul Engine, which leads to the rise of the Animancer class, who uses fragments of the Soul Engine to manipulate soul energy. With that, however, Copper is able then to plane shift effectively after recollecting herself back to the other Arcanites and be like, okay, I've just destroyed the planar boundaries in the Alterra sphere.
Let's set up a wall.
Because King Evil has effectively just done this, this is why we need to protect magic. Because, if this is what I can do with my power accidentally, because of King Evil's meddling and because of everything else going on, just think about what's going to happen if any of these factions get to the source of all magic. And so she manages to actually convince them to retreat back into their own demiplane and puts up a barrier and a boundary around the source of all magic, kind of just effectively taking magic with them out of the altered chat sphere.
Hey, you did it.
There we go, I did it. The shattered Altsphere. However, with that, because obviously Yellow is never kind of forced to output energy, there is no such thing as a demonoid in the new world. Because Copper was able to get back with indeterminate proof of like this is what could happen, but on a larger scale. I've already destroyed the planes, effectively rearranging and dispersing the landmass and the kind of elements throughout, which is why you no longer actually have different planes. And there's also mechanical differences to the plane shift spells, as well as teleportation in general, which I'm pretty sure I already covered in just terms of travel mechanics of there's now, you can't teleport from one end of the world to the other end of the world. You can only teleport a couple squares at a time, which has resulted in longer forms of warfare and effectively took this prime war that was still going on and essentially cooled it. Because they could no longer instantly teleport, they had to start going back to old-fashioned ship warfare. They actually had to start building up supply lines. They had to actually start creating boundaries and territories. They had to start colonizing different things, etc.
I know that's been talked about in the Shadow Sphere, but I don't think the party has really explored that much or taken much heed to it, because we've not got anyone, or we've not been really teleported anywhere apart from using like Dimension Door, Mystic Step, or anything, which is short-based teleportation or short range.
Yeah, I don't think it will so much come up until you guys get back to the ship and you upgrade it to have teleportation capabilities. And the only main difference story-wise is that effectively I've made travel matter in the world, in that people actually have to travel now. You can still plane shift between hexes and you can still teleport within continents and stuff. But in terms of larger, if you want to go, for example, say to the Ethereal Republic one day, or you actually want to go to the Monarchy or the Radiant Empire, we're actually going to have to fly there in an astral ship or an astral capable ship. You aren't able to just teleport there anymore. You can teleport between like hexes to get there, and that is probably one of the quickest way of essentially doing short hyper drives to get there.
But so a bit like
the hyper jumps from
Guardians.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you actually have to plan essentially, okay, how long can we travel for in terms of our rations and how much food we have on the ship, and are we going to have to make a pit stop at this outpost or this nation because we've only kind of store like a month or two of food before it goes off, and it's going to be like a 6-month journey. And this is where we'll get into more time skips in game as well. But while I've set all that up, for all I know, you could just never leave Salvos, and you could just make an entire base around Salvos and just study how to get home.
So going back to finding pieces of the Soul Engine. So are Animancers a Shattered Sphere only subclass, or? would they
Well,
be?
they're full
Would they appear?
class.
Or would
Um,
they appear in the normal sphere?
Technically, it can appear in the normal sphere because there are fragments of the soul engine from the demonoids, and it's actually one of the plots of another pre-stream campaign we had. In and I think this will be a slight spoiler for James, but we never finished the campaign. God, so many good stories just kind of happening.
Which campaign?
I remember there
Tell
being.
me. Tell me now.
I remember there being mention of the soul engine in Macapolis. When I think it was on Willows in the Willowwood. I think.
No, I think that was a sigil key. I don't know if there was.
But I remember there being mention. No, was it the Arcanet? Because I remember there being something about a soul engine.
Possibly. I know there was discussion because a lot of that the Arcanet campaign centered around kind of me first introducing the lore of Yellow, because I know that Bob wants to eventually do a campaign where we actually go into the Abyss and try to free Yellow.
Yeah.
So that,
that could be the 24-hour stream.
No, that's a full campaign. Even I couldn't wrap up that story in 24 hours because that's effectively a somewhat reskinned or similar to Descent into Avernus. But it'll be a Descent into the Abyss. And there's just so many layers to the Abyss that even 24 hours really wouldn't be able to fully explore it. 24 hours is good for like a good like one-shot story, and that I could actually tell like a decent one-shot story in more than 3 hours.
I think the name of the full name of the Abyss is literally the infinite layers of the Abyss. So I think they go on forever.
That's one of those slight differences between, while it's called the Abyss, it's called the Abyss in the general sense. I've tried to disassociate it from the planes on the D&D realm. And it's why I've renamed and reworked a lot of the planes, so they are their own planes now, with their own kind of lore and philosophy around them. But to answer James, it was Spirits of Savara.
I didn't play that.
Yep, which is why you wouldn't know anything about it.
Yeah,
I think that was the only campaign you've never played.
I believe. Didn't I play? I played one. Did I play one session as a halfling, or was that?
No, I think that was something else.
That was the intro to the to another session.
That was to the Killscore Mercenaries.
Yes,
that was set in Savara. We did the first session there because it's a prehistoric setting.
Yeah.
But one of the themes of Spirits of Savara is that they one of the characters has this gimmick item that they were just kind of born with, and they're not quite sure what it does, but it seems to be related to their backstory. And it is actually a fragment of a soul engine, because it is because while the soul engine didn't get dispersed throughout the Cosmere, there are fragments and pieces of it in the Abyss. So the demonoids are able to find it, and they're much more rare in the main sphere, but they do exist.
So a bit like moon rock asteroids hitting off the moon, creating moon rocks that land on Earth.
Yeah, they're very rare. Whereas they're actually not. They're still rare in the New World, in the Shattered Altsphere, but they're not as rare, and they're actually one of the potential plot lines is you can go and find all of them and try to reconstitute a soul engine. Yep, that is one of the plots I've built into the world. But it does kind of also give this idea that it also suggests that one of the few people that would be an Animancer is actually a demonoid, which leads to some cool enemies when we go back to the main sphere. Is I can have demonoids with Animancer powers.
Oh no, you guys! That's going to be terrible. He's going to drain souls and then eat them.
3 subclasses for the Animancer.
It's this. Some of them are good.
So
I'm going to go with the Monster Hunter.
So talking about classes and subclasses, we did mention earlier about talking through character building and how we build characters. Like,
how do you build your? I was going to ask you, Ben, first, because your ones all seem to be short.
That.
Why are you
They
all playing
do.
these small races?
Yes, I
What-
know.
what-
That's not intentional.
Is it because you yourself are short?
I mean, I'm not that short.
I mean, you're pretty short. You're like,
I'm 5'8".
well, you're short. Yeah, that's short.
Shorter than you, yeah.
Yeah.
Most people are shorter than James.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's not hard. I mean, if anyone was to play a small race, it'd be Kaylee.
Which they often do.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, it's really not intentional that I keep making small characters.
Is it though?
It's not, because I have played taller characters. I've played Goliaths. I've played elves. I mean, Briar, he's not a short character.
Who's that?
My Owlin in your first fight.
But they're an owl. That doesn't count.
How does that
Owls
not
are
count?
generally short birds.
But he's not a short character. He's about 6 foot.
But then you found out that he was actually just a stuffed toy in the hand of a child. So actually, keep trying.
That's you changing the storyline. That's not actually the character itself. That's just like, even in the kid's imagination, he was a tall character. So. But,
okay.
The smaller races I find to be fun. To be honest, they can get in and out of places.
They're fun for causing chaos.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I mean, Tink, chaos. Pizzazz, chaos. Fuck you, chaos. Rusty, chaos. A lot of my characters are chaotic, and it says a lot about me as a person.
Yeah.
But actually building the characters, I don't put much backstory into them as I'm making them. I have an idea.
Really?
I have an idea of what I want them to be, usually.
Do you start out with a race or a class, or just the idea of, I want to play someone who believes in that? Let's create from there. Or do you just start with a name?
Sometimes I start with a name. I mean, fuck you did start off as the name.
Did it really?
Yeah.
And then you thought, okay, what kind of creature would be fuck you? Well, a little chaos, so goblin, and he would insult people by yelling his name, so bard. There we go, goblin bard named fuck you.
That was more or less the.
Was that pretty much it?
That was pretty much it.
Gold star.
Pizzazz was actually, I think he was my very first D&D character. But I didn't really plan on. I think I talked about this on the previous All-Talka. How I'd planned him to be a wizard, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with him. It was only when he got to his taking what school of magic he got to, where I thought necromancy. And then maybe like level 5, I thought, he probably wants to become a lich at some point. Whereas the backstory with Tink and her shouting "fuck the gods," at the time that was just a throwaway line, and then I built up on that.
Yeah.
Rusty didn't really get into much lore wise with him. He was just shoot whatever's moving.
Big game hunter.
Basically, yeah. I mean that's what I made him to be, was a hunter, basic kind of. And then Briar seems to be sort of a protective sort of person. And then fuck you is Chaos Goblin.
Yeah.
Oh.
And speaking of Chaos Goblin, hi Wolfie.
Howdy.
Hello there. How was your stream?
It was good.
Actually, before we get into Wolfie, to comment on Sheepbeard's comments, and I'll explore this more when I talk about my philosophy too. I actually agree with Sheepbeard. I work from an idea of a character, and then I'll work backwards. But also, hey Wolfie.
Howdy. I also do the same way. I go some like weird ass concept. It's like, I want to do this. How do I do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was I don't know if you caught it, but the way "fuck you" came about was I thought of the name first.
Yes, I did catch that. That's when I literally joined in on the stream and so
Gotcha.
like that. I was like, all right.
See, when it comes to mine, and I mostly do characters for one shots because I predominantly DM, and it's been a while since I've been in a full length campaign. And
Mhm.
don't get me wrong, I love DMing because I love improving and generating the world. But when I do make a character, and I'm going to talk about one shots versus campaigns. So with one shots, because one shots are so short, you never get into the character or the backstory, right? I don't think it's as important when it comes to one shots.
They're
So I will
always a
predominantly
meme or a character.
Yeah, I will
more than anything
focus
else.
on something more mechanical. So I'll focus on either an idea or a theme or a stereotype of a character. And I think the latest one was with Damien Slaughterfist.
They got killed by a goblin.
I was about to say that character came about because you had a throat infection, didn't it?
No, I just made him a smoker. I actually had the character idea already. Generally, I'll consider what have I not played lately?
Yeah.
What haven't I got a chance to explore? And then I'll try and find some interesting mechanical take on that. So if I'm going, and it kind of depends one way or the other. I either go with like an interesting mechanical take and then pick a class that fits that. Normally fighter. I actually play a lot more fighters than most people because
I love Fighter as well. So.
I think they're highly customizable.
Yeah,
You can
and
get a
simple
lot
to
of
start with.
specialized mechanics. Or I'll think of a class I haven't played, and I'll think about what's an interesting take on that class. So if it's like a paladin or a cleric, maybe I'll go like a death cleric or something because they've got cool features. A druid or those druids who can turn into elements themselves are pretty cool. I'll base something on that. Although that one's a little bit more rare, it is normally the elven idea for some sort of stereotype. And in terms of I just want this like rough bounty hunter. Well, the table is going wild there. I'll this rough bounty hunter because that was the kind of premise of it, and also try and make a character that fits into the synopsis of the one shot because it's more important to me to have that compatibility for the enjoyment of gameplay. Especially for one shots, I feel like it's really emphasized in one shots of D&D as a game.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm all for having a great backstory and fleshing a backstory out, for a one shot, my goal is to have a good time.
Yeah.
My goal is also, and this mostly comes from me DMing, but also because it's just good as a good player. So any players out there who disagree with my next statement, look yourself in the mirror. And also what matters to the group enjoyment.
Yeah.
Because while I'm also looking for my fun, I'm also need to make something that gels with the general group. Or enhances the fun of the group. Right? Because that's the whole point of collaborative storytelling, right?
Yeah.
You need something that actually contributes to the story and adds to the story rather than subtracting from the story.
Yeah. 100% agree with that.
So that's my kind of focus when I come on into it of like, okay, so I have this rough bounty hunter. What would make for a good bounty hunter? I want somebody that can, get in and like really punch and do stuff. Actually, I have no idea how I got on to him being not an animancer. God, wrong. Artificer. No, Damien's an artificer, which is a really weird take because I've already done barbarians, and I've played so many throwaway barbarians for one shots because they're good just to. They fill that. They're really easy to fill that group role of. You don't have to be serious with them, and they can survive a punch or two, so you can just throw them into danger.
Also, they kept dying for you.
Yeah, because I make them as throwaways.
Yeah.
You hurl them into combat, and that's what they do.
A family of Goliaths died at Chris's hands. A whole
really
family. Did. A whole family. And then my character ate them.
To be fair, it was Tomb Annihilation, so what do you expect?
Oh, 100%, yeah. I've never played Tomb of Annihilation, but I've ran it as a GM.
They actually died in the tomb. We had to keep coming up with reasons for why we kept finding new characters in the tomb. And it was this family of barbarians that got split up and then frozen in time. And we just kept coming across them and unfreezing them. And then they would
statues
die.
of them. Yeah, then they'd immediately die.
Immediately
One
die.
one of them got chopped up in a meat grinder or something. One of them got flattened. One of them got ripped apart by gargoyles. And my character's just
was one
like
the statue
in the
by any
bag.
chance? You know the statue. I saw
No, I don't think so.
on someone else's stream. I won't say which one. Ha. But I watched some. They were doing a little Tomb of Annihilation like mini campaign essentially, and one of them they were memeing it up. One of them did the thing that I thought was the most painful thing I've ever seen a character do in any game. So you know, there's the statue in Tomb of Annihilation that as soon as you put gems in its hand, it will crush it.
Yes.
Yeah, they put what did they put it as the example? Their family jewels in there, and the gem cowered it, and that was how to make a character go. You know, there's that portal in the other room that changes your character's gender. Probably a good idea for you to go there right now, because you're gonna regret things otherwise.
Oh, yeah. James, do you want to tell us your Tomb of Annihilation story?
Which ones?
The one where you lost the same arm twice.
Oh my god.
That's a good one. I want to hear this.
Oh man, it was great. So so I was playing as I think he was my first. That was my first proper like full length character that I'd gone into. We'd played Curse of Strahd before, but I got in midway through. But so Allmorn was my first ever character I'd created from scratch, specifically for this campaign, because he was a dwarven life cleric. I knew that it was all going to be undead, so it was like, okay, turn undead, cleric, yeah, perfect. Gonna need heals, and he's got to be the straight man of the group, because we've got a druid who's saving dinosaurs, a monk who just runs into fight shit and up trees, and an anime girl with a giant scythe who talks to her plushy unicorn, who's her patron. So I was like,
three of these characters and not realize it.
Yeah, you did as well. They're combine them all. They're Alvina. So I was like, okay, so he's the straight man of the group. So he's the one who thinks. Okay, and we stumbled across this room where it was just empty doorways, and in the middle of this room, a plinth with a little crown on it. And one of I was charged with bringing this crown back. So I accidentally, earlier in the campaign, proposed to one of the half-orc NPCs who could have been your guide. And I was like, yeah, keep her safe, keep her in Port Nyanzaru, and I will bring you back any one thing from Omu. And the merchant prince was like, I want this crown that's one of a kind. I want the crown that belonged to the princess of Omu. And I'm like, well, shit. Where is it? So, but this was the crown. We found it, and it's just sat there in the plinth. And I'm like, I've got to have it. I gave him my word. He's the straight man of the group. He keeps his word. Whenever you go into the room, so to open the doors slide open by pointing your right hand like Iron Man at the door, and the door slides open. And then as soon as you take the crown, the door closes. And then to get out, you see a similar sort of icon on the inside of the door, except it's the left arm and it's gone at the elbow. So I'm thinking, shit, how do I do that? Oh, yeah, how do I do that? Luckily, however, crawling from two spheres of annihilation that were also conveniently located in the room were two bodaks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was in this room by myself. I somehow managed to survive them through a combination of turn undead, divine magic, and also meld into stone. I hid in the walls until they were gone. So I was in the wall. The bodaks were just standing there swaying on the spot, and I'm like, the fuck do I get out of here? Eventually, I did get out, and it was a whole thing. I was badly damaged, but I was still in the predicament of how the hell do I get my arm off? Well, I stuck it in the sphere of annihilation, and that severed it, healed the wound, dump, great. I get a wooden prosthesis, which I make myself because I've got woodcarver's tools because I'm a dwarf. Make a lovely wooden arm, and eventually we make our way all the way through the tomb. We get to sort of the final corridor. One of the players goes down this corridor that melts all your armor, all the non-magical stuff, melts all your armor and weapons and stuff. So I leave everything at the top of the stairs, right? Because of course I don't want the crown melting. I don't want my armor melting. So I'm basically a naked dwarf with one magical axe, going down this corridor and a non-magical arm.
I'm gonna interrupt there for a second. For those of you who have played with James and know how they can be, a little bit opportunistic, and when it comes to like items and what you might have on their person, let's just say that behavior did not change while they were naked, and the justifications for where they were hoarding some of their items got more elaborate as we went on.
There were often discussions of what's the carrying capacity of a dwarf's anus, because it's like, oh no, I've got the gems inside me. I'm not gonna leave my coin purse back there. What if someone accidentally nudges it? Anyway, we got through.
Where are you keeping that?
Yeah, exactly. This massive gun.
Hey, I saw one character who was literally like, what their entire, like, one of their big character points is they just love to eat, but they were just this like massive, like 800-pound fat guy, and it was like, oh yeah, I've just got this item. Where is it? This roll, and they just had it constantly. It was like they just had everything. They had like a utility roll, I think they named it. It was the worst thing ever, but also the best.
Anyway, we continue on. There's an aboleth. We befriend it. There's a whole series of events, lever pulling and all that sort of stuff. We make our way back through the corridor, and I'm like, where's all my stuff? It was right here at the top of the stairs. And so I look around. I somehow roll really high on the investigation, and the DM's like, oh yeah, you find scraps of what was once your armor at the bottom of the staircase. And we find out that Asarak's manservant he's alive, he's moving around the tomb, he has taken the crown and has kicked all my shit down the stairs to get melted, and he's placed the crown back in the plinth room. Now, also by this point, there are a series of keys that you have to collect to unlock the various old gods of Omu. And I just happened to pick the key of the flail snail, I think it was, or something like that. And you insert the key into the lock, and a magical chaos random effect occurs. And the magical random chaos effect I had was you instantly regenerate a lost limb. So I regenerated my arm. And then, of course, we find out that he's taken the thing and I've got to go get the crown again. So I do the exact same thing. I have to lose the arm again by sticking it in the bag of holding, the Sphere of Annihilation, to get the fucking crown again. So I lost the same arm twice in the exact same way, and then I kicked the guy's ass because he melted all my shit. And we were stuck in the tomb, and the one thing he had, aside from a bag of meat that was all of Chris's characters that were killed, he was basically surviving naked Gollum, like on just a bag of meat, smoking this crown. He's like, it's all mine now. I'll get out of here if it's the last thing I do. Anyway, yeah, that was how I lost.
Pretty sure at some point we do actually cycle a whole party apart from your character. And that all the original characters, apart from James, dies.
Yeah.
To the point where it's just their character feasting upon the dead barbarian family.
Yeah, we skipped forward to, I think it was the next session. Everyone else had new characters, and they stumbled across Ulmor, and it was just like...
Now, what's interesting is that mechanically we had effectively split the party before going into the tomb accidentally.
Yeah.
Just because of different storylines coming together that forced the party apart. So we had the characters that ended up got split off, and we made temporary characters go into the tomb. Returning, to find the lost rest of their party, one of which was dead, the other which was just eating barbarian remains.
They were not good remains. So when it came to the Battle of Asarak as well, everyone else was like, attack! Attack the guy! Kill the destroy the phylacteries, kill the god! And I'm just leaping, one-armed, with the crown on the stump, leaping across the lava pit that the god's on, leaping for the exit and going, ha! I'll escape. It was ridiculous.
You didn't try to fight this Asarak. You just went, peace!
No. Everyone else died again. But of course, it would be me who divine strike the last remaining. So there's the soulmonger was held up by like 3 rods that were stopping it from falling into the lava, and I divine struck one of the rods and took out the last of its hit points, and it just crumpled into the lava, and then Asarak appears right in front of me, just doing this. And I'm thinking, fuck, he's gonna punt me into the lava. I just managed to escape when like 4 other characters died. They later on reappeared as Death Knights.
Yeah.
2 of them were Kenku, I think. Is it 2 of them?
I want to see that. I want to see that.
Was it Kaylee's character? There was a Kenku barbarian.
It was both of them.
Yeah, there was a Kenku barbarian.
Because at some point we started making backup characters who were lost siblings. The first character.
Oh man.
I had a. I did a. It was obviously one of those supposed to be a 1-shot, end up being a 2-shot, I believe.
Same arc twice.
I did it on a stream. It was ages ago. I think I've mentioned this one before. I named it something like Lucy's House of Jump Scares or something like that, or Lucy's House of Horrors. Well, basically, I just built like a bunch of little like. This is the concept of a character. Build the rest of it around it. So I had like a Goliath monk that I built for like someone just take it. Anything else you just go, because you're supposed to roll through the characters a lot in the session. But what my favorite one I've ever built was the commoner. I built a random spod who's on death ability, because basically every character had like a couple of abilities they could use. Their one was just, oh, I know this house. I'm just lost in here. I've been here for ages. And they could like point to loot, essentially. But they were really bad at doing anything. But their special ability was they're a commoner. All the other characters are heroes. So the hero sacrifices themselves to save the commoner. So their on-death ability was someone else dies instead of you. But it was another player had to die instead of you. And I think my favourite line from that session was the person who ended up playing the commoner. Because they got the full list. Everyone got the full list. They could pick him. And he's the one that picked the commoner. And I had the great line of they started doing an accent, which broke everybody on the stream. And it caused me to say, I don't know what accent you're doing, but it's definitely racist to someone. I don't know who, but it's definitely racist somewhere. They ended up killing, which one was it? I think it was the party rogue they fell off a pit. The rogue just like jumped over the pit, but the commoner grabbed them by the leg, pulled the rogue down, and clambered up and killed the rogue into the spike pit. He was like, "You bastard!" That was very funny.
Nice.
So, Chris, I think you said that you that was how you make your 1-shot characters, but how would you make like your campaign characters then?
So yeah, my 1-shot characters are more about what can I get immediate fun out of. Those then be a bit more gimmicky. Because I don't imagine them leveling up, so I make them based on what are my level allocations and just make something that works for that level.
Yeah.
When it comes to main thingy campaign characters, I try and obviously make something that fits the world a bit more. But even then, I think I'll have a rough flavor I want to go for. Or actually, I think I technically start with what their role in the group is going to be. And I try and fill that niche, but mostly because I don't mind kind of tweaking characters, and I always try and make something. I can always try and find fun in something, regardless of what role I need to fill. It's just normally for the groups I've played in, I normally end up fulfilling the almost like direction leader in a way.
get that.
I mean, yeah, I've got a campaign that I play where one of the players are basically brand new to D&D. Another one is another veteran D&D player, but chose to play a wizard who is squishy, and the new player wanted to play a human rogue. So my thinking was, okay, so I want to be a sort of probably a healer, but a bit tanky as well. So I decided to play as a war cleric. But mentally, they're only about 6 years old.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have it so they are an Azma, who is the son of a Valkyrie and Tyr, basically.
Okay. Yep.
And he's chronologically about 18 to 20, but mentally about 6 years old because of like you have I forget what the actual term is, but maturing quickly.
Aging, basically the aging of
Yeah.
the species, essentially. Yeah.
Up until like a point of about 18 to 20, and then you just age normally for that race. But yeah, so he's really fun to play because he doesn't realize he's doing magic.
Interesting.
But he filled in the tanky healer sort of roles.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the only times I've actually thought, oh, I need to fill this role.
Yeah.
See, with myself, it's more the kind of James is just gone.
Yeah.
James has not been here.
It's more the persona or personality role in the group rather than mechanics. Just because of the way kind of D&D set up, attack is attack, and you kind of only really have attack and defense, and maybe a bit of utility.
Yeah.
Just because there isn't really a healer role so much as you're more about damage mitigation.
Yeah.
So I'll try and make a kind of personality kind of flavor or kind of stereotype in a way. Of what I think will be fun to play. And normally it'll take me a good couple, and I won't focus so much on like backstory or anything like that, just on their personality and how they play. Just because in the first I find like 3 to 5 sessions, I will massively retweak the character.
Yeah.
Just based on gameplay and feedback.
Always.
How I feel about
I
it.
very rarely make a backstory beforehand. The backstory will evolve organically.
I honestly, Alvina's generally the character I've written the most backstory for ever. I don't write backstory. I go, this is a vague concept. Let's see how this goes, and I'll make shit up on the fly. Like I was saying for Alvina, it's like, oh, this thing, does this work? And Chris goes, if you go here, yes, this actually works. It's like, that's where I'm from then.
Yeah.
Oh, this is how many siblings I have because random joke, and it's like, actually, you might have that many siblings because this reason. It's like,
Yeah.
cool.
And your professorship in fields.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll try and fill a character, a personality role rather than a mechanical role, and it'll normally be the kind of role of somebody kind of pushing the group in a direction who has a purpose for the plot, and then I'll create a backstory that is related to our plot goal, just to kind of give a reason for like, this is why we need to go here. So the first character I ever properly created, and rather than just one shot or short characters, would be Imalf Caligna. And yep, this is back in my great naming scheme days. And this was for when we were doing the Strad campaign.
Right.
So the synopsis of the campaign was that we're going to Barovia. So I made Caligna, I made Imalf this kind of almost kind of divine preacher in a way, but a more kind of brimstone divine preacher. Or at least he became more radical as I played him. And initially he started out as I think just a fire sorcerer, but this was before divine sorcerer came out. He actually transitioned after the first couple sessions because the new divine sorcerer subclass came out. So I transitioned him to divine sorcerer.
Yes.
But he was a pretty much the oh, this shopkeeper is trying to rip us off. Well, he's clearly evil. Let's burn down his shop. The gods will punish him with divine fury in the form of me. Which is why I made him a fire sorcerer, and then when divine sorcerer came out, I was like, this is perfect for the
Two
character.
on the nose. Two on the nose.
Yep. So yeah, that's what happened to Amalf. And Amalf has a great story that really solidified his character when we go into the haunted house initially. So the first, obviously, house on the side. And I end up taking on a broom. Right? The broom became my greatest enemy. And I think James joined like the session or two after this. So I don't know if James remembers the story about Amalf and the broom in the. So I get into a fight with a broom, and I start blasting firebolts into the broom closet while fighting this broom. Only we're like level either 1 or 2 at this point, so a broom's actually quite a challenge, and the broom knocks me out. And the broom starts sweeping my unconscious body into the closet that I've previously set on fire. So I'm rolling death saving throws, and somehow I come alive. I can't remember if I rolled a nat 20 or a character actually got to me to heal me just in time. But then we end up fighting this broom again, and throughout the whole thing, I'm just constantly going down and being brought up. And he just gets more and more radical of just burn the whole goddamn house down. I've had enough with this broom and this house. It's evil. All of it's evil. Let's just burn it all down. So that's how we burned the house down.
That's how you burn down the haunted house.
That's how we burned down the haunted house, because the bloody deserved it. He just effectively became a little bit more paladin-y as we got on off to a point. I think at some point there was an orphanage, or one of the kind of plots is we eventually die, but his soul gets trapped in an amulet, and there's a potential for a future campaign where he's the kind of guardian of a orphanage paladin. We had plans for a future story set in Barovia potentially. But yeah, his idea was that, okay, we're going Barovia. Wouldn't it be fun to just be kind of this brimstone kind of crusader? And at that point, there's so many options you can go. If you could go paladin or sorcerer or anything else that has firepower, and you can really flavor it in a lot of ways. And I found that's kind of just how generally I've ended up making my characters. Is if I have this kind of persona, and then I will find a class or a mechanical backup to help fit that persona. And this kind of fleshed out along with Kira, who is my next most prominent character, and it's the character that was with Olmorn. In that it was part of that original group. In that I wanted her to be effectively this kind of high energy, but also kind of flippant persona, in that she's initially kind of based on Buffy a little bit.
Okay.
So she ended up being a monk, and eventually I changed her subclass to be Drunken Monk. In that she is a monk of the Drunken Way. She has alert and mobile. And initially, she was supposed to just be the best friend of the anime character that James has previously mentioned. And that was kind of how the story fleshed out. Of we were just these two young, like 19-year-old female adventurers going out into the high sea for adventure because we wanted to explore. And one of her flaws ended up becoming just she gets incredibly bored. So what's she doing? She's bored. Well, she's a monk. She's highly energetic. She's that kind of classic archetype of she doesn't particularly care too much about the laws of reality or the laws of society. She's kind of got almost that kind of privileged viewpoint of, she'll do what needs to get done. Mm-hmm. Especially because the anime girl came from a noble background, so I was the kind of street rat to her nobility of I was the wise one and street smart one, and she was the educated noble last one.
In that show.
Yeah, right? There's a kind of theme there, or a kind of classic show dynamic there that I was going for, or that I kind of subconsciously go for, and I think that's how I'll also make a lot of my campaign characters, is they'll be heavily influenced by just the shows I've seen and the characters I've seen, and wouldn't it be cool if I kind of filled this kind of archetype, and then I'll make it my own. So eventually, I actually multi-classed with her into Rogue and a couple other things because we actually did that campaign for quite a while. We went from level 2 to like level 11.
To be honest, I'm just watching James get frustrated at his computer.
And he's gone.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I might have gone to 14. But over the course of time, because she started getting bored, she started doing small little robberies on the side. She was like, while we were in the there's like dinosaur races going on in the main city. She would go off and she would try to find out where they're storing all the money, and she would attempt to rob it to kind of increase her skills. So she ended up multi-classing to Rogue, and she took on this whole persona of putting on a mask similar to Zuko's blue
I
mask
was
in
about to say,
Avatar.
is it Zuko's blue mask spirit thing?
She would switch then, and she started creating this almost like secret personality or secret kind of persona where whenever she got split off from the group, she would end up becoming the kind of more thief subclass levels, and she would go and do her own adventures to prove that she could look after herself and do whatever she wanted.
Yeah, right.
And that actually kind of escalated in the story eventually to where she became a high level monk and a decent level rogue, so she was like, really proficient at things. And she ended up getting recruited into the Zentran Order. Because we met the Zentran when she was like a level like 13 multi-class at that point. And she just walks in, immune to all the poison shit they're doing, able to stun all of their best guys, and just immediately impress them with how powerful she is. And instantly gets recruited. To a point where I'm pretty sure actually I don't instantly get recruited now that I think about it. I'm pretty sure I pretend to be a member and then accidentally get promoted. And then just officially became a member. So she infiltrates it trying to be like this ultimate kind of spy persona and ends up becoming a high-ranking member in the Zentran. Purely out of her just high levels and stuff.
James back.
Yep, and then eventually there's also a good subplot going on there between her and Olmorn, who's become this father figure to her. James, you're just in time. I'm talking about Kira.
Oh, I love
Yep.
Kira.
To
My
the
endgame
point-
daughter.
Yep. Before I get to that, there's also a subplot surrounding she kept getting captured by things, particularly UNT. So she became racist to UNTs, just accidentally.
She
Accidentally
also
racist to snake people.
She also crashed every single vessel we were on. Every single vessel we were on, she had to steer, and she crashed them all. I think the total was 3 sailing ships and 2 airships.
To be fair, a couple of those were deliberate for plot reasons.
Yeah.
But it was funny that it just kept coincidentally happening.
I had
a palanquin and an airship she wasn't even on that was in a base.
How do you crash a palanquin? How do you manage?
Still.
She threw a guy out of it. One of the really rich guys.
That's not crashing. That's
You know what's hilarious? At that point, we'd become so rich as a party that she just kept, from like also her stealing stuff, she just kept throwing money at him and be like, "Shut up."
Shut up.
But yeah, because of that, she also started developing like mobile and started focusing on getting a little bit of mobility spells, particularly slippery or unrestrained movement. I forget what it's called. Freedom of movement. And she just became this nearly impossible to contain entity because she started developing a fear about being captured and like imprisoned, because her major kind of character at that point I'd kind of developed over time was freedom. Like her main ideology is freedom. She wants to be able to do what she wants, goes where she wants to go, doesn't want to be constrained by anything based on her kind of monk and roguish nature. And it kind of just developed to that of like she has a real fear of capture and being imprisoned. So she started finding every like magical item she could get and like having potions on her if necessary. But that eventually then gave away to she kept occasionally going down because she actually has the lowest hit points of the group, because I'm kind of focusing on dex so much.
Yeah, you go. Hard to actually hit, but it's when you get hit, you stay hit. Essentially.
Yeah, and occasionally she'd end up becoming kind of the off tank, especially when Olmor wasn't there, because Olmor was the main tank. But then Kier became the backup tank when he was either incapacitated or wasn't there. So she kept occasionally going down and came really close to death a number of times, to a point where she started kind of fearing death. And she started looking at religion and actually took a couple levels in cleric, based on her relationship with Olmor and the cleric, and needing to heal Olmor, and so Olmor could get up and tank.
At 27 AC, just kept going down, and it was used as reason for Olmor, I'm following in your footsteps. Great. Who do you worship? Mask.
So I ended up the god of thievery.
The god of thievery and death. Worship the Snake Mother, the goddess of the life cycle, birth and death and rebirth. Yeah, you shouldn't worship snakes, Olmorn. You should worship a guy in a mask.
But you anti-racism. I just started hating all snakes.
It was great. I even divine interventioned once, and she was like, "Snake, get rid of it." No.
Yeah, that was cute. That was my like properly fleshed out character, because we only did Barovia for like maybe 5 to 10 sessions before we all died because we went and had dinner with fucking Strad, and he just immediately killed us all.
Yeah, it's Strad.
Yeah. But then kind of on the next part of that, we did a more kind of Japanese inspired setting. And at this point, we'd end up with kind of the niche of we needed someone to have kind of a reason for the plot, and also a bit more kind of situated in the world, and kind of the cold, calm, collected leader type archetype. So this is how Kaito developed off this museum curator scholar. Just really, what's Sheep saying now?
Sheepbeard, I'll get into a story about that later. I've got a story about badges that I traumatized my players with in one of my campaigns. I'll get into that after crits.
Yeah, so Kaito became this cool, calm, collected kind of archetype of them. Actually kind of images in my mind of I can't remember his name, but from Log Horizon, a mix of
Hero?
the two main glasses guys.
Shiro and Christy.
Yeah, so I had those two in my mind when creating Kaito. Particularly, I just really wanted to do the glasses thing.
Yeah. Yep. I started doing that for a while when I got these, and I was like, I need to stop.
So because of this, I then looked into like, okay, so he's this kind of intellectual. He's a little bit more of maybe not highborn, but kind of working middle class. He's a scholar, and he focuses on going out and collecting rare pieces and bringing them back, because that was actually the main campaign of the first plot, is that we were returning and escorting an artifact from a dig back to this main city for the museum. And the rest of these guys I'd hired to help me transport it. So they were bodyguarding. And at that point, we were experimenting with Gestalt classes. So I made him a Gestalt Wizard and Echo Knight. And I gave him effectively, he kind of, while he wasn't an elf, because we were going with a different race for the settings, he had almost kind of that elven nature to him. He was trained in the samurai, because we're going for a slightly more Japanese setting. So he was constantly one of those guys who would constantly like train his body in the idea that you have to train your body to train your mind. And he was very much a workaholic. So he ended up being this Gestalt wizard fighter with the Echo Knight, and he also did essentially his main study was on the planes and the idea of alternative realities in the setting, which is how he managed to develop a little bit of power with the Echo Knights.
Just realised that character you're describing. It's the main character from a Terry Pratchett book, essentially. What's his freaking name?
Ooh.
It's from Moving Pictures. The main guy from Moving Pictures. It's what it's reminding me of a lot.
I have read Moving Pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it a while though.
Yeah.
I read it the other month. What was it? What was his name? It's basically a wizard, but he's like, well, I can't beat up. It's like it's kind of in a different way, but it's kind of similar.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Buddy? It's not Buddy. He's
no, Buddy was in Soul Music, I think.
I think so. Yeah. What was his? I'm gonna look it up. But he's basically he's a wizard, and he's a mega intelligent wizard because he wants to stay a student forever because that's how he keeps all his bills paid.
Mm-hmm.
So he just stays a student. So he's got, but his like uncle
Yep.
essentially meant that
I could do
if
that.
he gets under a certain score, the money stops. If he passes, obviously the money stops. So he has to get like, he always gets like 74 or something like that. He gets exactly just enough that it's not quite a pass, but it's above the level. And because he can't be asked to be like overweight, because it's more effort to walk around while overweight rather than just being kind of fit. So he ended up being just really fit because he just goes to the gym occasionally. He's like, yeah, I'm just fairly decent condition. And he ends up being a movie star because he's like, hey, yeah, you're decent looking. You've got you're kind of ripped. You know how to use a sword ish. You'll be fine.
Nice. Well, that
What's
sounds
his
good.
fucking name? Moving Pictures main character. I've got to get his name.
But yeah, so that's how I ended up developing Kaito. Is I had this persona if he needed to fill the kind of leadership role there, but also kind of be situated with the main plot. What's his name?
Victor Tubelbend. That was his name. It's Victor. Is the one.
Nice.
Love that character. It was great. He was like, well, you're kind of warping reality and causing this giant monster to appear, but it's kind of not a good idea. How do you know this thing? No reason. Just looked it up in a book once. I'm not a wizard. What are you talking?
But yeah. So the only other character I think I've created recently is for James's yeah.
35.
Yeah, it was that long ago.
The herring gun.
No, before that, because the Haragon was technically a one-shot character.
Snuggums, wasn't it?
Yeah, and you could tell he's a one-shot character because he's just a gimmick. Was actually for the heist. What is it? The water thing heist. I forgot what it's called. Waterdeep.
Dragon heist.
For Dragon Heist. James' Dragon Heist, because it's only like, even if it was a short campaign we did, it was still technically a campaign, so I still went into it with campaign mindset.
Yeah.
So my mindset there was that because obviously we're going to heist, we wanted a heist archetype. So also I was making a character of Kaylee at the time. So we decided to actually make like a pair character, and we went with a Bonnie and Clyde kind of archetype. So I had to make a character who was effectively a sharpshooter. So I looked into, okay, so I want this guy to be kind of dexterous, a little bit of strength if I can get it, but also very charismatic. So I wanted dex, charisma. He's got to be able to kind of almost Indiana Jones, like swing around, but with effectively a gun. But we went with a crossbow.
Pistol crossbow.
Yep. So I ended up taking the crossbow expert feat for a fighter, and effectively made him a crossbow expert. And then just coincidentally, he also then became, because we're just really mechanically inclined, really good with a net. Because a crossbow and a net with the party we had just meant we obliterated every one of James's encounter.
They really did.
Yep.
Nets underrated. Nets are underrated.
Especially with crossbow expert, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's how I essentially made that character. Is I have this kind of group archetype, or this kind of archetype role to be filled, and then I will find a mechanic to kind of fill it, or the kind of class and race combo to back up that idea of a play style.
Yeah, I occasionally would do that, but the problem is that as soon as someone goes, oh, there's a campaign I'm planning, I go, I've got a character. That's the problem. I would very much go, I'll pick something which fits with the party, but I'm nearly always the guy who picks first, because I was like, we'll fit whatever fits in the pie, and everyone else is doing that. I was like, well, I'll just build a character then. Here I'm going. I am the frontline. Build whatever you want. That's where I started building like frontline characters usually, because I always basically thought, if I build something that can take a lot of hits, then everyone else can build whatever the heck they want, and it can be dumb as hell. My character's the guy that just gets beaten up, which means they can build squishy as hell characters, and it'll actually work. They don't have to build hit points, because I am the wall. And also the fact that I kept, for some reason, getting attacked by literally everything immediately, so whenever I tried to play anything interesting, I died immediately. So, sod it! I'll just build into that.
Yeah, that was kind of like how Robin Lockley came about as well. He was a bit of a meme character. I just thought, ooh, I want to play Robin Hood. So, Ranger, human, That'll do.
Yeah. I like Rutherford. In a but at that point, actually, I promised Sheepbeard I'd go into the Badger story. So, right, in a campaign I did, this was not a streamed one, so it was linked to Geddon, but it was like the precursor to Geddon because it was on a campaign I nicknamed the Unbound World, which is basically the players are basically thrown into a planet which is got the big ass dragons from Geddon. It's got a few of them on it because the god that made the world nicked some of the eggs for a bet with his brothers of these dragons. It's the only time that those type of dragon eggs can be moved by magic in any way is when they're an egg. They're immune to magic as soon as they're born. So he nicked a few of the eggs with his brothers, and the dad of the dragon eggs found them just as they were plane shifting out, killed his two brothers, the other two gods, and maimed the third god before they could plane shift out. But he got out with these eggs. And basically the eggs hatched in the other world, so it was like, shit, this is the world I have. I can't get rid of them. So he just keeps summoning in everything, like he's summoning lesser gods, adventurers, just trying everything to try and get something that can kill these fucking dragons which have just taken over the planet, essentially, that he's made. So the party ends up essentially being brought in, because there's high-level adventurers, they just get thrown in to this random forest, which is actually in the dragon's territory. And eventually, lots of things happen, and eventually they end up in the mountain with the dragons. They get invited there as guests, essentially. I don't remember what they did. Oh, no, I know. They saved the daughter of one of the dragons who wasn't actually a full dragon. They were half god, because one of the gods had basically, like, joined the side of the dragons and fallen in love with one of them. So they rescued one of the daughters, which had been bound, which helped them through a dungeon, actually. But then they got an invitation to the castle, and it was the big castle, basically big ass volcano full of life magic. So there's just a ton of animals live there, and they've got and they're intelligent and very powerful. And basically, if any injury is caused to a living creature in there, it is instantly regenerated. So the party had a pet small animal. It was like a rabbit or something which could talk, right? And this rabbit ended up getting picked on by a badger in the room. So the party was trying to stop the badger from hurting the rabbit in any way. But the badger was a little shit, and the party was rolling so badly. Like, it was like, okay, I'm going to pick up the badger to stop it from, like, charging at the rabbit. Natural 1. You eat shit into the fireplace, the badger starts charging across the room. I'm going to stop the badger. Natural 1. You fall under the bed, the badger jumps off of your head and keeps charging the rabbit. It gets the rabbit, okay? The rabbit's, like, screaming. One of the characters is like, right, I'm going to kick the badger. Natural 1. They keep rolling ones. They're like 7 natural ones in a row. For reference. And I went, right, I need to do something here. The animal's having massive stats in here. The badger throws the rabbit out the window over the volcanic crater. It's in a volcano, is the whole castle. The party's monk was an anime character, okay? If anyone's seen Problem Children coming from another world, aren't they? If anyone's seen that anime, look up the character Black Rabbit from that, and that's the character. They're a monk, right? Level 20 monk at this point. And they were like sorcerer monk or something. They're mostly monk, but something else in there. So they had the ability to run on liquids. So this character had fire resistance and full-on sprinted at top speed. They had like 300 movement around at this point because of various things they'd gotten into the campaign. Full tilt ran across a volcanic crater that this badger had yeeted a rabbit out the window for. The character caught the rabbit and ran back to the house. And in this interim, like, one of the characters tried shooting the badger, missed the badger, hit the rabbit. The arrows was a chaos arrow, so it had random magical effect, which ended up mutating the rabbit. basically it gave it antlers, fangs, and wings. So this rabbit
So you made
was
a
then
cryptid.
kind of, but it was a whoppatinger from WoW. Essentially, is what it literally ended up being described as. So then this character like adopted the rabbit, and the rabbit could fly but couldn't land. So it was just screaming. This talking rabbit was screaming around the room, trying to figure out how to fly. And this badger was still there, and the Empire was fighting this tiny, normal badger essentially for like 5 rounds. And the entire party at the end of the encounter, they didn't even kill the rabbit. They lost. They lost to the badger. They didn't lose as a party, but the badger got away. And the entire party went, "Can we please have favored enemy badgers?" And I went, "Yes,
I mean,
you
yeah,
can."
that seems fair.
It was like an hour of the session was this party trying to sort out a badger and a rabbit fighting. And it escalated.
I mean, that sounds typical for a D&D session, so.
Yeah, it was insane. And this badger kept popping up during the sessions, by the way, as long as they were in the castle. So the party was like, "You!" and just chased it down.
No matter what else they were doing.
One of them ended up chasing the rabbit into a classroom that the teacher was an elder god that basically had a all the elder gods had like a manifestation, which is like their bodyguard, and it was based on the Huntress from Dead by Daylight. So the badger sneaks into the classroom. This character bursts through the door of the classroom, and the manifestation immediately goes, "Threat," and pitches a freaking battle axe at the character, launching them back out the door and nearly killing them instantly. And it's like, they got into so much trouble because of that badger. Just
Anyone
taunting.
else have any other stories of NPCs being complete
yeah,
shits?
anyone
Or
else
shall
got
we
little shit?
shall we finish up? It's just after 9.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. I'm getting hungry.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so this has been a All-Talka Alterra. We've had Chris, James, and Wolfie jumping in.
Yay!
I've been fuck you.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
You have been, it is great. I literally saw you guys were live and went, "Can I join?"
Yeah.
I still felt for talking.
It was an impromptu stream, so.
But yeah, I didn't spot any other things. I literally like checked my messages today. I was like, "Oh shit, there's messages." Oh.
I'll get to creating that character off stream, I think.
Fair enough. Yeah, so I'm going to go to an end screen. I'm going to see if I can try keep the sound of everyone. I'm just going to make sure I've got the right things enabled. So I want an audio.
Friday is at 6
hang
Yeah.
on British time.
Yep,
GMT
all GMT.
or BST or whatever it is.
So I'm just going to do.
I think it's summertime now.
Yeah, it's BST. Sorry, yeah. I want that.
Whatever time as my stream says, whatever time it is applicable for the UK at this moment. That's literally what it is, so I don't have to change it.
and check out our back history where I think Killscore Mercenaries is on our YouTube channel. As is
about half of Killscore is on mine as well.
Yeah,
I think it's on
the-
on Jamie's. We didn't get around to actually uploading videos until TSA.
Yeah,
but I think the plan is once we get to the outro screen, James, if you have like an outro spiel you want to do, go for it.
Okay, if I've got this set up
only
right.
if you have one, James, since this is your talker.
Right, so, I'm just going to switch to it and just see if it's set up right. So if you just keep talking.
We're just going to keep talking, and then once we get to the outro screen, we can actually wrap up now.
It looks like it's right.
The two, I'm watching the stream at the moment, I'm waiting for it to work. The two channel, what's the Alterra's YouTube?
World of Alterra.
World of Alterra.
World of Alterra on YouTube, or Wolfie Bane on YouTube, capital W, capital B with a space, I believe. I can't remember what my own YouTube is.
I have switched to the end screen.
Yes, you can find the headquarters of the Mad Capitalist epilogue campaigns on Dragon Bob YouTube channel. This has been Alterra All-Talka. I've been James. That's been Chris.
don't know why I'm
You
waving.
don't
I don't know
wave
why-
when
No,
an
there's
exit
no,
stream.
there's no,
Say
there's no
bye.
video,
Yeah,
there's
well,
no
well,
videos
yeah.
currently.
Yeah, there's no video on the stream at the minute.
That
so
was Ben.
Yeah.
That was
there's no
Ben,
pointing.
and that was Ben. Playing us fuck you as always.
Yep.
Good night, and tune in next time for more Alterra and All-Talking.
Yeah,
Bye.
good night.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Don't know why I'm waving because there's
I'm also
Yeah, I
waving.
did the same thing.
Wave! Ow!
Just smile and wave,
I'm
boys.
pressing the
There's
button.
nothing.
Smile and wave.
Now.